Good Yontif, everyone. Yontif. I have always been a frazzled mom. Before I became a mom, I had grand plans of being one of those parents who always had it together, who could handle anything that gets thrown their way, and that does it with such effortlessly cool, collected calm that other parents beg for the recipe to that special sauce. So here's the thing, that did not happen for me. Parenthood for me has always been more of a juggling act than anything else. One where I see how many balls that I can toss in the air before one of them inevitably gets dropped. Because being a parent is hard. And as most parents tell you, it's all about juggling. And sometimes you're good at catching the next new thing that's thrown your way, and sometimes you're just not. When Rabbi, my now 4-year-old, was a few months old, we started introducing solid foods. We started with rice cereal, we progressed to oatmeal, and then we moved into purees. I remember standing at the aisle in the grocery store, utterly panicked as I look after shelf of baby food. What was I supposed to start with? Was it peas or was it carrots? If I introduced fruits too early, would I have a sugar addict for a baby? What was the difference between a step 1 food and a step 2 food? Did I need organic or was regular Gerber going to be just fine? I was sleep deprived and I was overwhelmed. And more than anything, I really just didn't want to get it wrong. For whatever reason, that decision in that particular moment in time felt really important. So there I was, standing in the baby aisle, spending entirely too much time thinking about watery vegetables, and I finally make a decision and start putting food into my cart when somebody comes and looks at my basket and says, you know, if you really love your baby, you won't feed him that garbage. You'll make your own baby food. And I just lost it. I left my cart there in the aisle, and I'm sorry to the baker's employee who had to put everything back. And I got in my car, guilt already gnawing away at my already very fragile new mommy heart. Because I love my baby. And apparently, that meant making sweet potato, apple, banana, squash purees. And that meant adding another ball to my already pretty precarious juggling act. So the next morning, I came to Temple, and I sat down in Cantor Alexander's office, and I asked her, do you remember how to make baby food? To which she responded something like, yeah, I went to the grocery store and I bought some. So needless to say, that conversation is only one of the many reasons that I am very fortunate to call Cantor my colleague and my very dear friend. Because in addition to being kind and compassionate and soothing my mom guilt and telling me that feeding my kids store-bought baby food will not be the thing that determines his success in life and that it is certainly not the measure of my love for my child, she reminded me that we simply can't do it all. And not doing it all doesn't make me a good mom or a bad mom, it simply makes me human. And the truth is, the notion that we can't do it all is one of the most common refrains we hear, and it's also something that I think most of us fight against with every fiber of our being. Because we want to be everywhere and we want to do everything, and so we're constantly fighting against the one thing that holds us back from doing everything it is that we want to do. And that is time. Time is simultaneously endless, and it's also frustratingly finite. And it's also the one thing that there is never enough of, regardless of the stage of life that we find ourselves in. One moment we're soaking up baby snuggles and we're committing the sound of their first giggles to memory, and the next we're sending them off to kindergarten. One minute we're graduating from college, and in a blink, we find ourselves at our retirement parties. One minute we have our whole lives in front of us, and the next we're nearing the end of our time on this earth, and still it is not enough time. Over the summer, I read a book by Oliver Burkeman that really challenged me to think critically about my understanding of time. In his book, he tells the story where he asks his friends to guess off the top of their heads, without doing any mental arithmetic, how many weeks they thought the average person can expect to live. One friend, he writes, names a number in the 6 figures. Yet, as I have felt obliged to inform her, a fairly modest 6-figure number of weeks, 310,000, is the approximate duration of all human civilization since the ancient Sumerians of Mesopotamia. It turns out, Berkman writes, that the average human lifespan is absurdly, terrifyingly, insultingly short. Assuming you live to be 80, you'll have about 4,000 weeks. 4,000 weeks, that's it. Our lives are insignificant blips on the cosmic radar. It's no wonder that we always feel like we're in a race against time, because we are. And so we're left to grapple with what to do with the outrageous brevity and shimmering possibilities of our 4,000 weeks. In the end, we're left with a simple math equation. We have X number of things to do and Y amount of time to do them in. But rather than acknowledge that we can't do it all, most of us go to great lengths to avoid contemplating our own morbidity. And in fact, most of us actually refuse to confront the brevity of our lives until we're forced to, either through circumstance or through days like today, when our liturgy compels us to wrestle with the harsh reality that between this Yom Kippur and next, some of us will live and some of us will die, some by fire, some by water, some by sword, and some by beast. But even then, even when we confront the stark reality of our cosmic insignificance head on, most of us end up doing mental gymnastics to convince ourselves that if we can only find the right life hack, the right time management system, the right way to multitask, that we'll be able to squeeze more into what precious little time we have. So we meal prep, and we zero out our inboxes every night, and we figure out the perfect morning routine, and we implement any other number of cleaning hacks and tips and tricks to keep up with the mountains of dishes to wash and laundry to do. But, spoiler alert, we still have to eat 3 times a day. Emptying our inboxes at night does not actually stop them from filling up by the next morning. Trust me, I've tried. Getting up earlier just means you're getting less sleep, and I'm sorry to report the dishes and the laundry continue to pile up. Yet, we still keep hunting for that better, more time-efficient solution. And we do it in service to the idea that if we can just get the stuff done that we don't really want to do, then we can get to the important things. If we can check everything off the list, then we'll be able to do the things that we really want to do, the things that actually matter. In nearly every funeral that I officiate, I offer words from Ecclesiastes that tell us, for everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which we plant, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance. And I share these words because I find tremendous comfort in the ideas that our lives are ordered in such a way that we will experience all of those seasons, each in their own time. That there are actually times set aside for every purpose under heaven, and that our lives are made more meaningful and holy as we move amidst and between them. But if I'm being honest, I also struggle with this text, because even though I want to believe it, deep down I do wonder, what if there's not time for every experience under heaven? And as it turns out, I'm not the only person who's wondered if Ecclesiastes got it wrong. One of my favorite poets, Yehuda Amichai, writes, "A man does not have time in his life to have time for everything. He doesn't have seasons enough to have a season for every purpose." Ecclesiastes was wrong about that. A man needs to love and hate at the same moment, to laugh and cry with the same eyes, with the same hands to throw stones and to gather them, to make love in war and war in love, to hate and forgive and remember and forget, to arrange and confuse, to eat and to digest what history takes years and years to do. Ecclesiastes got it wrong, Amichai says, There is not time enough to have time for everything. We have to experience everything all at the same time, or we risk not having that experience at all. Because if we wait to build until we finish tearing down, we'll never build. And if we wait to dance until we finish grieving, we'll never dance. And the same is true with the endless mountains of to-do lists. We cannot and we will not do it all. In fact, it's actually irrational to feel like we could or should do more with the same 24-hour-a-day period, despite what society and our own tyrannical inner voices try to tell us. But, Oliver Burkeman writes, we rarely stop to consider things so rationally, though, because that would mean confronting the painful truth of our limitations. We would be forced to acknowledge that there are hard choices to be made. Which balls to let drop, which people to disappoint, which cherished ambitions to let go, and which roles to fail at. Maybe you can't keep your current job while also seeing your children, Berkman suggests. Maybe making sufficient time in the week for your creative calling means that you'll never have an especially tidy home or get quite as much exercise as you should, and so on. Instead, in an attempt to avoid these unpleasant truths, we deploy the strategy that dominates most conventional advice on how to deal with busyness. We tell ourselves that we'll just have to find a way to do more, to try to address our busyness, you could say, by making ourselves busier still. The notion that we can do it all is a false narrative, and it's fundamentally flawed because there is not time enough in our lives to have time for everything. And it's not because we didn't work hard enough or that we weren't committed or creative or capable enough. The simple truth is that there are limitations to what we can do, and that is simultaneously paralyzing, and it's also profoundly freeing. Because when we say yes to something, we are also, in essence, saying no to something else. And we can either do that by abdicating responsibility and allowing someone else's agenda to take precedence over our own, or we can intentionally take ownership of our own lives and embrace our limitations. Traditionally on Yom Kippur, we read from Parshat Nitzavim in Deuteronomy, which reminds us that our choices matter and that they have consequences. God speaks to the Israelite people and says, I have put before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life so that you and your offspring will live. Choose life, God says, and the choice isn't whether or not to live, the choice is how to live. It's about choosing the kind of lives that we want to have, which means embracing and even celebrating our limitations. Because at the end of the day, we get to choose. But as Ecclesiastes says, life is fleeting, and it's as ephemeral as the air we breathe. And so whatever we choose to do, however we choose to live out our 4,000 precious weeks, we should do whatever it is in our power to do, and do it with all our might. So cook dinner or get takeout. Make sure your home is spotless, or make blanket forts on every surface of your family room. Go out with friends or stay home and do nothing at all. Spend your money or save it. But whatever you do, Ecclesiastes says, do it on purpose. When I got home the night after my baby food debacle, I pulled out a jar of pre-made, store-bought food for Rabbi. Because for me, loving my baby actually just meant making sure that he got fed, and that I got to be the one to feed him. And for me, the time that I spent choo-choo training the green beans into his mouth was a far more significant measure of my love than making the puree from scratch would have ever been. As a rabbi, I have the very great privilege of sitting with people in their final days of life as they contemplate what it will mean to leave this world. And regardless of the circumstance, regardless of whether I'm holding the hand of a young person whose life will be cut tragically short, or I'm sitting with a great-grandparent at the end of a very full and very beautiful life, the sentiment is always, always the same. There wasn't enough time. So do what you love with the people that you love most. Practice saying no more often, even when it's hard, and especially when saying no means that at the end of your 4,000 weeks, it actually won't matter. Because when you really think about it, Holiness comes from the very thing that we fight so fiercely against, our limitations. The act of making a choice means intentionally sacrificing everything else in order to pursue that which will bring us greater joy and deeper meaning. As we move into our new year, we stand on the precipice of an opportunity to create profound and lasting change in our lives. God sets before us a choice. Choose life, God says. Choose the life you want to live and do it on purpose. And so I wonder, what would it look like if we chose to embrace and maybe even celebrate our limitations? What would it look like if we woke up every morning not ready to do more, but ready to do less? And as we contemplate these questions, I'll leave you with the words of poet Mary Oliver, who wrote, "I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it that you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" Gemar Chatima Tova.